Hi, this is Ramona Depares. Welcome to SiGMATV. Joining us today is Phillips from Nel Advisory. He is an iGaming specialist and will be talking to us all about content, player profiles, all the exciting stuff that makes our industry so wonderful. Let's see what he has to share with us. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Ramona. It's a pleasure to be here speaking with you.
So then, let's kick off with content. Outsourcing content has become a big thing in iGaming. What are the advantages of this strategy?
Well, there are many advantages, but I think it's worth saying that there's always been a mix of insourcing and outsourcing of content throughout the history of the industry. Some of the bigger players, maybe Bet365, Entain, Flutter, now have their own development studios. So they've gone out and bought studios and they've integrated them, and they're producing their own content. Prior to that, we had operators who were trying to create content within their existing teams, which is quite sort of problematic because these are people that maybe didn't come from that world. So we're seeing some of the bigger guys go out and buy studios to produce content. But actually now, the more outsourcing of content actually helps the industry because there are so many great game studios out there creating some great content. It's a fantastic way for them to get more and more content through. And I guess it depends on where the operation is, whether they're a startup operation, probably can't afford to develop their own content anyway. So that way that they can go out and almost pick a mix, what they want. But, there are sort of, things that you have to do to make sure that you can kind of stand out as you go. But I think we will see this continued mix of outsourcing and insourcing. And I think everyone will kind of find their levels.
It's all about striking the right balance, I guess.
Of course, yeah,
but brand identity is also very important, whether you're a startup or you're a more established name, maybe. Is it possible, even while maintaining this mix, to create your own identity?
Yeah, I think that comes back to not just content, but about your platform and about your your website, or more importantly, your mobile application. So how is your UI UX? Do you get your consumers to where they want to be? Are you using AI and data science to really understand your users? Because if I come in for the first time to your operation, you don't know me, so in theory I should be offered something quite generic, because you don't know which way that I'm going to go. But once you've seen my deposit patterns and you've seen my play patterns, you should then be customizing the mix. So you might have access to thousands of games, especially if you go through a content aggregation platform, which many do now. You have access to so much content, but rather than giving me 1,000 games, why not focus me with 100 games, but which are more like the ones I'm going to play based on, do I like big wins? Do I like low wins but high volatility? What do I like to do? So I think that's the way that you're going to differentiate your brands.
So since we're talking about refining the profile of the player, how important is localization, especially bearing in mind that individual markets are now becoming increasingly more and more regulated?
Yeah, localization has been crucial always, regardless of regulation. I mean, we can come back to regulation later perhaps, but if you're not in the local language, and by that I mean written for that language, not Google Translate, that the words fit within the buttons. That sounds very basic, but if you translate a word from English to German to Spanish to whatever it may be, all of a sudden it doesn't look right. So there's some basics there, but you also need to make sure that you have localized payment solutions. You have local partners. That could be a telco, it could be a media brand. Do you have a local celebrity or a local influencer? All of these things give your brand credibility and allow you to localize properly. So those are the things that have been going on forever and a day. And the ones that do that well are the ones that succeed. In terms of regulations, that's less so, I guess, about localization. I guess more around meeting requirements for that market, whether it be around stake limits and affordability checks and KYC and all that kind of good stuff. But I guess that all falls under the bandwidth of localization for sure. Actually, just one more point on that, really. I mean, I've just done a few projects. Well, I'm sort of working globally. I've done a lot of these things for the US. So you've got this different regulations state by state. And actually in the US, you've only got sort of 5 or 6 states that have legalized iGaming. So it's still very much sports betting driven. So that's driving the mix and the localization so you can meet that. And in some cases, you've only got 5 or 6 licenses per state, which means you have to be even closer to what you're doing to make it right to succeed. But having worked across East and West Africa over the last couple of years as well, localization becomes even more important because you have a mobile-driven operation because very few people have desktop machines. I mean, some do, but mobile is more prevalent. The majority have smartphones, but they are, I guess, lower-end smartphones to maybe we're used to in Europe. As a result of that, the functionality isn't quite the same. So you have to be able to tailor your game and maybe reduce it in terms of its data and download speeds and cost. And you also got people who are working off of maybe data plans. We have virtually unlimited data, whereas in other territories, that isn't the case. Mobile pay is also kind of very, very important. So really, you need to investigate your market and you need to know the consumer before you even start, really.
I guess it's about customizing your consumer segmentation and making sure that you're offering a 360-degree approach, really and truly. Yeah,
absolutely. Like I say, I mean, the one way to look at it is that you have to cater for the lowest denominator, which may be, what is the lowest specification that you're going to be supporting. Coming back to my AI data science point earlier, if you can segment the database, then maybe you can have 3 or 4 offerings so that if you've got a VIP who's got super high, fast connection and wants to play everything, you give them access to that. But actually, if I'm, a sort of a lower staker or, I only have 1 payment solution, then don't offer me 10 payment solutions that I can't ever use. Don't offer me a game that I'm never going to download. So, you might call it one-to-one CRM. There are very few operators that get to the level that we're talking about. I mean, quite a lot of them get a long way, down the road. But I think that's the kind of the utopia to aim for. And if you get close to it, then I think you're going to do pretty well.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What can you tell me about multi-channel approaches? Like everything is kind of fully integrated nowadays. How does that work? How has it affected the landscape?
Most of the big groups out there are pretty much multi-channel. From mobile to desktop to tablet to retail if they have it. You can look at the likes of Flutter and Entain, I guess leading that way, I guess because all of the brands that they have coming together. There are other brands out there that I won't name that maybe haven't quite got there yet. And they still have a different approach to every product channel. So if you have different product channels, you have casino, you have bingo, you have sports, you have poker, you have whatever it may be, there needs to be some commonality, some common feel. So when you're moving around, you know where you are. And crucial things like deposit, withdraw, login, customer support, they're all in the same place. You haven't got to go hunting for it. Then you can take that further and talk about joined up loyalty programs, VIP programs. If you do have retail, can you play the same content? So a machine in a retail outlet is exactly the same content, in theory, as the game content on your phone. So why should the experience be different? If you've got a game with multi levels, or maybe a jackpot feature, if I'm on level 5 for the jackpot when I'm in retail, when I get home, why can't I carry on from level 5? So I think the answer to the question is yes, multi-channel is on everyone's front of their minds. Not everyone is integrated as they need to be, which may come back to the first question about working with third parties. The more third parties you work with, the harder that becomes. So that's why a lot of content providers now go through aggregators, so that the aggregator does that hard work for you, so that you're just having to deliver your game if you're on the content side. if you've got your own platform, which a lot of the big operators, have now, they make it a requirement that if you integrate into their platform, that you have to meet all of what they're going to need, so that the consumer has a seamless, experience. Behind the scenes, it might be sticky tape and keeping everything together, but as far as the consumer is concerned, it's a straightforward process. This industry really is no different to any other, e-commerce industry. You have to take what is happening in other areas, and whether it be a Netflix or an Amazon, it's a seamless experience that you get what you want and you get to it very, very quickly. And as an industry, we've always played catch up to other industries like that, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because they get, they go off and do all that hard work first, and then we make sure that we can then catch up with that. But sometimes the gaps of catching up can be quite far. Your previous question, we asked about regulation around localization, and actually what we have now is such a heavy approach on delivering regulatory requirements, which is very important, of course, especially around consumer protection, that we're developing to meet those requirements, and not necessarily developing to meet what the next generation of user is going to want. Whether it's the video gamer today, has a whole different expectation for entertainment than maybe the previous generation, who were just happy to be able to do something on their phones, and now the next generation have something different. So, regulation takes up a lot of time, which means we are a little way behind, other industries for sure.
You mentioned future generations of players. Is there a way to future-proof the industry? Like, how can operators safeguard the business, essentially?
Well, they need to be talking to people, to sort of doing their research. Don't just talk to your customers. Talk to the next generations. What we've seen, especially around esports, is that professional sports teams, so especially in the US, the NFL teams and the basketball teams are sponsoring esports teams. So having people playing video games on their behalf. So it's a way to sort of get the brands across. And now we're having gambling brands doing something similar. But I guess the short answer is look to what other industries are doing. I mentioned Netflix already, but especially during COVID, providing entertainment, what people want, when they want it, and in that kind of snacking environment. So I've got 10 minutes. How can I get maximum entertainment from my 10 minutes? So that's making sure that content is always available, the right products are always available. I shouldn't have to wait for an event to start, to wait for a tournament, to wait for a jackpot, to wait for a sports event, which is why sports and virtual sports have seen growth, because they're always there and they're always on demand. And then you've got other areas to look at as well around, next generation payment solutions, which might be sort of crypto based, which will certainly be around sort of Apple Pay and Google Pay. The next generation, I don't think are going to may not even have bank accounts. They'll be on prepay, or they'll be in mobile credit. So these types of things, really just getting people to what they want as quickly as possible. Looking at your brands, as well. If you ask someone in their, I don't know, early 20s, about a traditional bookmaker brand, they're going to think, well, these are the shops on the high street where the old men go into, and and it's a smoky environment. It isn't what they're looking for. So again, look to social media, look to the influencers, to see what they're doing. And what I always advise is, bring lots of young people into your business. Have young ideas, fresh ideas. You need a few old heads around maybe to help guide and advise, but have young people in your teams, helping you grow and develop.
Thank you, Dan. That was very insightful, and it's always great to be reminded that at the end of the day, it's all about the players and what they want. This is a fun industry after all.
Sure.
Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you everyone for following SiGMA TV. Keep on following.